바랄 뿐입니다. 넌 보고해야 되지.
넌 날 죽였어.
넌 억적으로 구한다.
The scene opens in 1990, setting the stage for a thrilling and intense story. We meet Detective Choi, a dedicated investigator who has been chasing down a brutal serial killer for years. The killer, known for his chilling murders of 10 women, has eluded justice for far too long, and Choi is determined to stop him. The tension builds as Choi is on the tail of the killer during a high-stakes night chase. The atmosphere is dark and ominous as Choi corners the suspect in a grim, dimly lit apartment. However, the killer has a shocking move in store. He uses his own mother as a human shield to protect himself from Choi's gunfire. This moment of hesitation from Choi, who is unable to pull the trigger with the mother in the line of fire, allows the killer to slip away. In a desperate act of retaliation, the killer slashes his mother's throat, leaving her to bleed out. Choi, in a final effort to apprehend the murderer, shoots the killer in the shoulder. But his efforts are in vain. The killer escapes into the shadows, leaving Choi battered and wounded, having been stabbed and slashed in the face during the struggle. The scar that marks Choi's face becomes a symbol of his failure, one that he carries for the next 15 years. The story fast forwards to the present day, 15 years later. The statute of limitations for the serial killer's crimes has expired, and the law can no longer prosecute him for the murders. Choi, who has been unable to move on from his failure, finds himself drowning in a sea of alcohol. Consumed by guilt and unable to find closure, he numbs his pain with drink. The loss of his chance at justice weighs heavily on him, especially when he receives a call from a young man named Young Hyun-sik. Hyun-sik reveals that his mother was the killer's first victim, and he has been struggling with the trauma for years. He is now at his breaking point, convinced that the killer will never face justice, and he contemplates ending his own life. Choi rushes to Hyun-sik's apartment in a desperate attempt to save him, but by the time he arrives, it is too late. Hyun-sik has already jumped from the rooftop, and his body is tragically struck by a passing bus. The scene is a tragic one, and it only deepens Choi's feelings of hopelessness. Watching the young man's life slip away like this only reinforces Choi's sense of failure, and he is left to mourn the loss of another potential life that could have been saved. Subscribe, please. Peace out. We don't have too many subscribers, and we are making a lot of efforts to provide you our best work. Your single click on this subscribe button will motivate us to build a good relation between you and us forever. Please do. 2 years later, a shocking turn of events brings the killer back into the public eye. Lee Do-seok, a man with a striking resemblance to the original murderer, suddenly emerges and confesses to the 10 killings. He publishes a book titled I Am the Murderer, in which he claims full responsibility for the murders. In his book, Lee details each crime in unnerving detail, describing how he lured each of the victims and carried out the grisly killings. He even reveals the bullet wound in his shoulder, the same wound Choi inflicted on him during their confrontation years earlier. With his good looks and seemingly sincere apology, Lee quickly becomes a media sensation. He gains a large following of supporters who believe in his heartfelt remorse and his desire to make amends. Lee's confession creates a stir across the country, and he begins to publicly apologize to the families of the victims. He even goes to the homes of the families, begging for their forgiveness, and claiming that he is only confessing because he feels guilty for his past actions. His media tour seems genuine, and many begin to believe that he is indeed the real killer. However, Choi, still haunted by the past, cannot accept that Lee is the true murderer. His gut tells him that something isn't right, and he is convinced that Lee is somehow manipulating the public. Choi's suspicions are confirmed when he confronts Lee in person. In a tense scene, Lee mockingly throws food at Choi, taunting him for his inability to catch the real killer. This only serves to infuriate Choi further, but he is left powerless, as the law prevents him from taking any action against Lee. Meanwhile, Mrs. Han, the mother of Soo-yeon, the 11th victim who has never been found, begins her own quest for justice. Soo-yeon disappeared years ago, and her body has never been discovered. Mrs. Han, unable to let go of the pain and the mystery of her daughter's disappearance, begins to organize a group of the other victims' families. Together, they plot to capture Lee and force him to reveal the location of Soo-yeon's body. Their plan takes shape when they discover that Lee frequently swims at a private pool, and they decide to take action. During one of Lee's swimming sessions, the families execute their plan. They release venomous snakes into the pool in an attempt to provoke a bite that will incapacitate him. The family members act quickly, posing as health workers to capture him. Meanwhile, Choi is informed. However, despite being bitten, Lee manages to survive, and his bodyguards quickly intervene. This marks the beginning of a cat-and-mouse chase between the family members, Choi, and Lee's bodyguards. Ultimately, the family members succeed in taking Lee away. That night, Choi devises a plan and tracks down the house. Silently, under the cover of darkness, he uses night vision to help Lee escape right under Mrs. Han's nose. The families are forced to abandon the plan, and Lee escapes unharmed. It is in this moment that the truth begins to unravel. Why would Choi, who has been chasing this killer for years, assist him in escaping the family's trap? The plot takes a further twist when Lee and Choi are invited to participate in a televised debate. The debate is meant to be a public forum, where Lee can answer questions about his confessions, and experts can weigh in on whether he is the real killer. As the debate grows heated, a mysterious caller, identified only as Jay, begins asking Lee difficult and pointed questions. Lee, who has been able to evade real scrutiny so far, becomes rattled and begins to show signs of uncertainty. Jay pushes Lee to reveal more, and the pressure becomes too much for him. As the debate continues, Jay reveals that they are calling from Detective Choi's mother's house, and Choi rushes home to find an unsettling clue. An audio recording of Soo-yeon's voice, indicating that she has been held captive all these years. The truth begins to emerge in a shocking revelation. Soo-yeon, Choi's fiancée, has been the killer's true victim all along. Lee was never the real murderer, but rather a pawn in a complex plan orchestrated by Jay. Choi begins to piece together the full extent of the conspiracy and realizes that the true killer has been manipulating everyone for years. To everyone's shock, Choi reveals that Lee's confession was all part of a larger scheme, and Lee was merely a distraction created by Jay to cover up the truth. As the investigation reaches its climax, Choi plays a critical piece of evidence, a tape of Soo-yeon's final words, which confirms that she was held captive by Jay. The recording, made just minutes before the statute of limitations expired, provides Choi with the legal grounds to arrest Jay for the 11th murder, even though the other crimes can no longer be prosecuted. The revelation is explosive, and it sets off a chain of events that leads to a final confrontation. Jay agrees to a confrontation, and the family members also prepare for revenge. In a tense standoff, everyone arrives, and Jay reveals his true identity. He discloses the location of the bones of his last victim, Yoon. Choi confronts Jay and nearly shoots him in a fit of rage. But other officers intervene to stop him. Jay escapes again, this time using Mrs. Han as a pawn. The chaos continues as Jay manages to escape. When she tries to stab him with a pen, he dodges it and escapes once more. In the final face-off, Choi trails Jay with his car but meets with an accident. In a climactic high-speed truck chase, Choi risks his life. The last scene mirrors the first, with Choi lying on the ground. Soon the police arrive. But not before Mrs. Han makes an emotional attempt to take justice into her own hands. She tries to stab Jay with a venomous pen she has brought, but Choi stops her, knowing that further violence will not bring back their loved ones. In a heartbreaking moment, Choi stabs Jay himself, ending the killer's reign of terror once and for all. The film ends with Choi's release from prison, as he is greeted by the families of the victims and the media, who now recognize him as the man who finally brought justice. The statute of limitations is extended to 25 years, ensuring that future victims will not be denied justice. Though Choi has found some semblance of closure, the scars of his past will never fully heal. As he walks away from the case, the audience is left to ponder the complexities of justice, vengeance, and the human cost of seeking truth.